Welcome back to a special edition of the Wolff Den. Today's sponsor is the Meckler Group, great supporters of the program. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we have a real special guest. He's a Hall of Fame sports writer from the Boston Globe. You've probably seen him on ESPN's Around the Horn, PTI, sports reporters, authored books, co-authored books. Really honored to welcome Bob Ryan to the Wolff Den. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Matt. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Normally, I introduce the person because I think it's better for someone else to say, like, how do you want to be introduced? If you were going to add another 10, 15 seconds to that, how do you introduce yourself?
It's interesting. I would say I'm just a sports fan who had the opportunity to make it into a living, quite frankly. And I always had a dual interest in sports and writing. And it's a two-part word, of course, sports writing. And the first part is the easy part, because millions of people can enjoy and watch and maybe even talk sports, but not too many of them could sit down and write a 45-minute game story on deadline and have it come out, in a nice fashion. So but that's it. I'm still a fan, and everything that to me has always been centered with that, and I think that's an important distinction, because not all sports writers are truly fans.
Yeah, and they don't have to know or be right about to be a sports writer, which is different than being a sports reporter. We'll dive into that. A couple of things, connections here I want to talk about. You grew up, went to Lawrenceville. I grew up and went to Marlboro High School. Do you know who the most famous Marlboro High School person is?
Oh boy, no, I wish I could. Go ahead.
Jim Nance. Jim Nance went to Marlboro High School.
Oh, all right. Very good.
Yeah, and Manalapan, which is the neighboring town, you might know someone who's from Manalapan, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Tony Reale. That's where he hails.
I didn't realize. Okay.
That's where he hails from. We had some people who went to Lawrenceville. It's a private school, and they wanted to play lacrosse. So a few people went there. I want to start with I want to get into all of your career and a whole host of things, talk about a ton of sports. What comes to my mind with sports reporting, and there's a lot of sort of controversy. There's something going on in the Florida Gators world right now. I'm a Gator. There is an outfit that reported that our recruit has asked to get out. It's not true. The parents are saying no. As a reporter, this happens so often where people want to be the first to report something. They say something false. Is that just, what's your feeling on that? Because that's not something you would do. You don't care about that. Is that just people needing to get a reputation? They want to get the beat on things. Why does that stuff happen still?
There's obviously the scoop mentality, I'll call it, has always existed to a degree. It's heightened now because of the intense competition and the proliferation of outlets that are out there in competition for whatever the facts are, whatever the incident is, whatever it is. It used to be, I'll give an example of, in my day, which let's say it's 1986, okay, the height of the Larry Bird era in Boston. And I wasn't a big scoop guy. I did my due diligence as a reporter. You got to go report the story. I cared about writing more than anything. But you gotta have something to write about. Naturally. Okay. Now, point is, I had one or two times, thanks to my relationship with Bird, where I got a Bird scoop. And I could write that scoop and hit the send button or whatever the case was at 5 p.m. and go home and have a nice dinner in the night, and know that when nothing was going to happen to jolt my little world, people were going to pick up that paper the next morning, and there it was going to be. Well, today, no, but you can't act like that, naturally. Whatever the case is, the first thing you do, you got to tweet, right? You got to tweet and try to beat the pack. And it's news cycles are 24/7, and it's a whole different world. I chose to get out of that world. It'll be 11 years in July. August 12th, 2012 was my last day as a full-time writer for the Boston Globe. And I'm happy I don't have to deal with this craziness now.
Because there's no penalty. Like headline, incorrect, BS headline on the front page, retraction on page 34 in the corner.
Yeah, well, it's just a different world. I don't envy these people, particularly the high profile people, the insiders, that on television, for example, the Sheffers and the Mortensons and the Wojnarowskis and so forth. I can't. That's got to be a tension-filled life. I mean, you're on call. You're on duty 24/7. Literally.
Yeah.
You're on duty 24/7, 365. I never lived a life like that. When I started off, you had a summer off season. Now there are no more off seasons in anything. Now there's no sport, and particularly true in college as well. There's no off season. What you have are two phases. You're playing games or you're not playing games. And when you're not playing games, the coverage is still there and is almost as extensive as when you're playing games. Because in all sports, you got free agency, you got trade deadline, you got all kinds of endless speculation about this and that, and the comings and goings, and all the manufactured crises that people come up with for talk shows. And I have to be I'm part of that deal. We have to come up with these manufactured crises on around the horn. And okay, so there's only 2 seasons. So there's no off season, but there used to be a thing called the off season.
Yeah.
And I had a leisurely summer, and the only activity that took place in basketball when I started back in the '69 was the Cutchers game at the Cutchers Country Club in Monticello, New York, in August of that each summer, and that was the only off-season activity of any consequence. So you heard vague rumors about the Rucker League in New York, but nobody
of
covered
course.
it. And the Baker League in Philadelphia, nobody covered it.
Now they're all. Isn't that who got hurt? Who just got hurt in their own basketball game this year or last year? It was.
Yeah. But it was a vastly different world. I'm trying to remember what your question was.
Yeah, I want to talk about the difference in the world. It was about the scoop and how is you probably heard this trivia question. The only 2 days in the year where there's no 4 major league any games from any of the 4 leagues. 2 days in the year.
What? How many? I don't know. I know it's very rare, but
it's the day before and the day after the All-Star game in baseball. That's it. It's the only day where you can't turn on and watch a major league game. To talk about the environment how it is today and now, Skip Bayless in the news, something like that, where he gets roasted. My feeling is a lot of what Skip does is to get hot takes. The same with Stephen A. and they yell and they scream. What did you think about his comment? Is that manufactured drama?
I know what I know of having been acquainted with Skip for 30 some years and I haven't seen him in a little while now, but that's just part of his
Skip being Skip, right?
He has a vision of how he's going to go about things, and it's very, very raw in that sense. It's very pure, and that doesn't surprise me that he would. And I think he always embraced, whether he would ever articulate it, the contrarian role. Loved being the guy to go against the grain.
Yeah.
And in a sense, and could stay and can take the heat. You got to be able to take the heat.
Of course. But do people do hot takes just for the sake of being hot takes, even though, or be contrarian on some of these shows, even though they don't really believe it because that's their thing or that's what they think people.
That's dangerous. I always wanted to say, when I wrote columns, I always said I never wrote something for effect, ever. And I wanted to write something that if I had to defend it, I could defend it, in honesty. Now, you make mistakes. That's, in fact, I used to say the easiest and sometimes the most fun columns to write were I screwed up column. I was wrong about something, and then you can have a little time, make fun of yourself a little bit. It shows your vulnerability, your humanity to the readers and all that. And I didn't mind, but I know from my second world, my TV world, a lot of these issues are manufactured issues, and you have to take a stand, for the sake of the argument. And that's a little. I wasn't as comfortable. I've never been as comfortable with that. I try to carefully guard myself as to not get myself into any unwarranted trouble, by saying something about a topic I really didn't care about.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
You had a funny controversy regarding the 2006 March Madness, and you actually made a funny comment about when people were asking about you, I think you said, look it up on Google or Wikipedia. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the one where I had the wrong guys playing against each other.
Yeah, like Big Baby playing versus George Mason.
Yeah, right. And, how that, I have no idea how that happened, but it did. And then it got through, which is worse.
Yeah.
And I had to live with that. I can't get away from it. Somebody can find it. It gets brought up. Okay, it's on my Wikipedia. Not that that's 100% reliable. I can tell you, there's as anybody will tell you, you wish you could go in and doctor up you, because there's some stuff in there. There's lingering stuff that simply isn't true. But that one I can't run away from.
Well, I think you can change on Wikipedia. I don't even know. The other thing,
I don't know how to.
That's why we're on Zoom here.
But anyway, but you're right. I have to live with that, and I did, and I, it's embarrassing and stupid, but we're all, I always go back to, if you're familiar with Some Like It Hot, the famous last line of the movie, and Joey Brown found out he was in love with a man who was masquerading as a woman. So, well, nobody's perfect. And that's the line I, have to rely on. Nobody's perfect.
Brent, great friend, great supporter of the show, is an excellent writer, does some stuff on the Gators and fishing. He's saying, stuff about journalism being dead and, real writing. It's not like it used to be. Would you say that
I understand. Okay, there's some of the best. This writing is still writing. Writing is good. The forums are different.
Yeah.
I mean, The Athletic is a terrific forum for people. There's excellent writers there. There's excellent writers in newspapers. There's excellent writers on various websites and stuff. No, the writing. I don't understand why they say that. The things we were talking about earlier that confuse the issue and all that. Yeah, that's different. But the actual pure writing, I don't see it's as good as it's ever been. Of course, there's wonderful writers out there. It's not the issue. No, not at all.
I want to go back to Wikipedia for 1 second. The other thing they'll find is the Jordana Kid comments that you had. I had a conversation about this. Obviously, it was said in jest. He asked you if you want to take it back, and of course, you said in jest. So why should I take it back? How would that play out? You got suspended for a month. How does that play out today?
Well, today I probably would have gotten fired. They would have been, if they would have not been able to withstand whatever heat would be generated today, as opposed to the heat that was generated in the month of April of 2003. I'm coming up to a 20th anniversary. How about that this year? My biggest stupid aspect of it was that I was being thrown a lifeline by the host and my friend Bob Lobel, and didn't accept it. And it had occurred to me that Jason Kidd had in fact hit her. I forgot that he had in fact hit her. And, I might have said, well, I don't want to get involved in this now. And because it was all hyperbole. Now, let me tell you the postscript to that from my point of view. Less than a month later, after the suspension, Doris Roberts, so she was from, Everybody Loves Raymond, right?
Yeah.
Okay, an Emmy-winning actress. And she was in town for a personal appearance in Boston area. And she was asked to talk about the fact that the comedian, the star, help me, quick.
Ray?
Was holding up whether he wanted to come back and do the show or not. And she loved doing the show because she just won an Emmy, for God's sake,
Yeah.
And she said, I'd like to smack him. Well, what was my phrase that I used? I'd like to smack her, because that was the phrase that got me in trouble. And so I had to laugh at that. She comes into Boston and says, I'd like to smack him. Well, of course, a woman smacking a man's different, although don't ask Dana White. But so anyway, but that was my, and Bob Lobel, his instincts were great. He's trying to save me. And I didn't take the lifeline that he was extending me on that show.
Yeah.
And but it was pure and utter hyperbole. But it didn't ring very well.
Did it affect how your responses and stuff moving forward after you got done with that suspension at all?
Being more careful about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem was not that I was going to get myself in trouble in writing trouble. I got myself in trouble on a live television show.
Yeah.
And I was a little more. I would say that I never came close to any repeat of
No,
occurrence
no, pretty
ever.
clean.
And I'm still, now we're talking 20 years. It is 20 years later, and I'm still, on television. I'm still on ESPN. I'll be on Around the Horn again next week, and I've been, not come close to making that mistake twice.
No, your record speaks for itself. Your work speaks for itself. I want to go back to what you talked about, Larry Bird, because becoming someone who can get a scoop from someone like Larry Bird. Larry Bird's a friend. How does that happen?
Well, you interact as a person. I mean, you hit it off as you do or you don't. The first time I met him was to do an interview for a story in Us magazine in the summer of 1979, after he'd been signed. And because remember, he was drafted in 78, and then he played out the next year at Indiana State, goes to the finals. All right, now he signs after a lot of, it was not an easy signing, but anyway, I'm doing this article for Us magazine, and Bob Wolff is his agent, and Larry wouldn't do it. He wanted to do it at Wolff's house. I wasn't going to go to where Larry was living, which was around the corner. That's number one. He was wary of the media. He was that's the best word to use it, because of things that had happened along the way. And we did this perfunctory interview, and he said, here's the ground rules. Nobody's going to come to my house, and I'll do what I have to do before games and all that. But anyway, well, the season starts. I'm covering the team. I'm hanging around, and I think we hit it off, and he seemed to like me, and it's on you. But I had, it's here's my deal. And I never thought about articulating this, and I mean, it kind of formulated maybe like 3 years ago. And imagine that I'm an after I've been retired for 87 years. But here's what the deal is for any person covering a team, be it professional, collegiate. Here's the deal: you are a salesperson, and the commodity you're selling is you. Mm-hmm. And you have to find a way to ingratiate yourself with the players, the coaching staff, the administrators, if it's a GM of a team, and if it's a college, the AD, And by the way, you do go about your business. The kind of questions you ask, the preparation you have, how maybe how you dress, but the whole package of your and proving over time that you're trustworthy, and if you're in circumstances where you may hear things that you'll understand what's printable and what's not printable. Now, these things take a little time, and but you're a salesperson and you're selling you. It's as simple as that.
But they can understand if you're like the people who are out there are phony, who are just trying to game, so. Right? They know that.
Yeah, I think so, and for the most part. Now, not everybody. Hey, you're dealing with all kinds of range of people.
Sure.
I don't know. Of intelligence and sophistication and awareness. One of the great lucky things that happened to me in the beginning of my career, when I started covering the Celtics at age 23 years old, was the nature of the people that I was covering. First year I covered the team, they weren't, that was the first year post Bill Russell and Sam Jones. They went from a championship to winning 34 games. They weren't very good. But I had these mature veterans, John Havlicek, Sat Sanders, Don Nelson. I used them as sounding board. They taught me the game, the nuances of the NBA. They embraced me. They gave me a break. I could have gone to some other team that didn't have these kind of people, and my whole orientation would have been different. And the same thing with Tom Heinsohn, the coach. He was a rookie coach. He had never coached a thing in his life when he got handed this job by Red Auerbach after Russell retired. And he was aware enough, I think, although we never articulated this either, but he was aware enough to know that it was for his benefit to cultivate the envoy from the most important media outlet in New England, which was far and away the Boston Globe. Television, local television had no clout, no relevance at all. They weren't covering anything on a daily basis. We were the reigning paper. We were and I needed him to learn, the nuances of the NBA as well. I was a college-oriented guy. My whole orientation had been college basketball. Oh, I went to games in the Garden when I was a BC student, but I was a college freak, not an NBA freak. And I needed to learn the ins and outs of the NBA. And so with the guidance of all the times cups of coffee I had with Heinsohn and all the hanging around with the players, I learned about the NBA.
Who influenced you to be a sports fan? Brother, father? How did that become?
It's all my father's DNA. I'm an only child of a man named Bill Ryan, who in Trenton, New Jersey, who was a sports-oriented person. He was involved in making his life living in sports, whether like marketing and promotion and PR kind of stuff. He also was the assistant athletic director at Villanova for 2 years when I was 6 years old to 8 years old. And that got me introduced into college sports big time, because I started going to the Palestra when I was 6. And as a matter of fact, everybody in the world thinks of January 8th as one thing only, which is Elvis's birthday, which it is. But I always think of January 8th because on January 8th, 1954, I was present on that Friday night when Bob Schaefer of Villanova set the Palestra scoring record of 46 points, breaking the record of 45 held by his teammate, Larry Hennessy. And I was present on that Friday night when he got 46 against Baldwin Wallace. And the last two, where he drove to the basket, got tripped, fell, and got 2 free throws and made 46. Now how many 8-year-olds have that kind of recollection? I'm sorry.
No, that's a great memory.
I went to countless baseball games at Connie Mack Stadium, Polo Grounds, growing up with my father. He had connections with both the Giants and the Phillies.
Do you have a ticket to that game? That's why we're talking here today. You wrote an article.
The earliest ticket that I have is the 1957 Army Notre Dame game at Municipal Stadium in Philadelphia. And that was the resumption of the rivalry that had ended in 1947 through some political reasons. The two had been a great rivalry in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Army Notre Dame. Well, actually, it started in 1913 when Newt Rockne and Gus DeReyes, beat Army 35-13 with the 5 touchdown passes. DeReyes to Rockne, that ushered in the forward pass really as a weapon in America.
Why'd you keep it?
Why'd I keep that ticket?
Yeah.
That's what I don't know. It just did. It's what you did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, so I still have that stuff. And what happened? My father died in May of '57, and my mother she did her best to keep my sports flame going, my sports flame lit, and she got tickets for this Army Notre Dame game in Municipal Stadium, and we went to that game. I'd gone to the 1955 Army Navy game, but I don't have a stub for that one. I'm sorry, but that's the earliest stuff that I had, and I always have my other prize stubs include Auerbach's last game in 1966, Game 7 of the '66 finals. Brett Auerbach's last game. I have that ticket stub. I was in.
That's awesome. I was at the Army Navy game last year when it was at in the Meadowlands. That was my first time ever. Great experience. Definitely a bucket list for anyone.
Yeah.
So your dad was not around to see your glory years. I feel like same with mine. I lost mine in 15. Started my, to see the success. What do you think he would be most proud of you for, and what do you think he would like to watch or read? What would excite him most about what you've done in the last 20 years?
And I was 11 and didn't. It's stuff that you don't know, the stuff you're not looking for. You know, what I'm saying, as a parent at that time. That's a good question. I've thought about that. I have thought about that, and but I don't have a definitive answer. I mean, I like to think he would be proud of my writing ability, but he was a verbal guy. He was like a born Toastmaster kind of guy. He took over a room when he was an organizer and a leader type guy. He would so when I think of him, I think of his verbal. I can't associate him with the written word and what he read or anything like that. It was all about personal relationships and all about speaking. And he was well known in town in Trenton. When he died, it was a major sports story in my hometown of Trenton, and people knew him for many tentacles that he had over the years in Trenton. And so, but it was all about personal stuff, more rather than and his very outgoing personality.
So that's where you get it from, just a lot.
No, I mean, but the sports DNA is definitely, from him, and here's what I say, and this is not hyperbole. This is the gospel truth. Starting with the idea that most people, I think, if you think about it, when do you think your oldest remembrance is? What age? 4. I'd say it's around 4 for me that I can remember something from.
Yeah, mine's way later for some reason, but I think you're right.
Okay. I don't recall a time in our lives when, as growing up, when we weren't at a game, going to a game, or getting ready to go to a game. That's what we did. And we went to baseball all summer, and I went to basketball, and he would take me on Friday night to high school basketball, Trenton Catholic, and for example, and I couldn't wait till Saturday morning to read the paper, to read about the game I had just seen. And kind of the game wasn't validated in my head until I actually read about it, even though I had just seen it.
You ever see him play St. Anthony's?
Most kids, no, that was St. Anthony's hadn't they weren't, that was too early before they got rolling. The big rivals in the state were St. Peter's of Jersey City and St. Peter's of New Brunswick and Bergen Catholic and the Catholic world of New Jersey basketball and parochial A.
We had Christian Brothers Academy in our own division. A bunch of
Lincoff, New Jersey.
Yeah, a bunch of Jews. We're all Jews on a basketball team, and Christian Brothers and Manalapan too. I know Reality's not Jewish, but Manalapan.
So in 1957, Trenton Catholic won the parochial A and won the Esket. Now the Esket was a major deal in the 50s. The Eastern States Catholic Invitational Tournament in Newport, Rhode Island, at Rogers High School, and there were two great tournaments in the East. The other was the Knights of Columbus in Washington, D.C. But Trenton Catholic won the whole thing, beating All Hallows in the finals in 1957. Trenton was a very conscious sports town. I was very lucky. I would say I had no idea until later on how lucky I was to grow up in that town. 40 miles from Philly, 60 from New York. We got everything on the TV dial, everything, which most people didn't. They grew up and you got your 3 network stations and that's it in the 50s and 60s. We had everything on the dial from 2 to 13, except for 8.
And then think about if you didn't go to Boston, you always think like I was supposed to go to University of Arizona, follow my sister, but I ended up following my brother down to the University of Florida. How different life would be. Now, I think your work, you would have been successful wherever you go, but it would have been a different type of success, a different type of timeline.
My college get down to BC Holy. I got into BC Holy Cross in Georgetown. I got rejected by Yale and Williams, and got into BC Holy Cross in Georgetown. And basically, it came down to Boston over Washington over Worcester, and so I went to BC. And imagine the Celtics versus the Washington Bullets or the Wizards. Please, I was totally lucky to wind up in Boston. It couldn't have been a better thing for me the way the thing evolved, and so absolutely, Boston's been an ideal circumstance for me.
And when they win, I mean, it's good that you write, you're going to get noticed and all. But when you win, the way that the Boston Celtics won, I mean, how much does that help your career?
Oh, I think no question, and I mean, and I didn't have a long, remember they had, I never covered the Russell teams, but the team, they rebuilt, and when Cowens came, they turned it around immediately there. And by the 4th year I was covering the team, they won 68 games, and they lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Knicks, and Havlicek got hurt in Game 3. And then the next year they win it all, and in '76 they win it all. So yes, absolutely, it was it gave me a chance to get seen and noticed. There's no question, and it really helped my career, no doubt.
What's your favorite Boston Celtics story, or that you recorded, or moment, or that you wrote?
Well, I mean, it was very personal for me when they won in '74 in Milwaukee on that Sunday afternoon. First of all, it was a very fascinating series, and these are my guys. I was present at the creation. I was at the Manhattan Project. I mean, from the see this group come together, and had become personally friendly particularly with Havlicek and Cowens, and I mean, great acquaintanceship with Nelson and Sanders.
You wrote a book with Havlicek.
Yeah, I mean, my first As Told To book was with John. Yeah, I remember we were in Houston. We're walking down the street, and that's when he said to me, "Hey, I'd like to do a book. Do you want to do it with me?" And I remember where we were, and sure, that was my first of 3. I also did one with Cousy, and of course I did one with Bird. But that was personal for me for sure. I remember I really really got a great rise out of that. Then of course there's so many highlights in the Bird era, in that regard. But it wasn't it would never be as personal again as it was for me. Remember, when I started covering that team, I started when I was 23. I was the same age as the rookies, and not that much younger than the middle age veterans. I mean, Havlicek and Nelly were at 29 and 30. And then a guy came along who I became very fond of and very friendly with, and who's I'm mourning now, as are many others, and that is Paul Silas. And there was a really special human being, and it was Paul Silas. And we hit it off, and I had more probably non-basketball conversations with Paul Silas than any other player that I ever dealt with.
Yeah, it's speaking on that note, the toughest thing you ever had to write about is it Len Bias?
That was brutal. The other one was Reggie Lewis.
Reggie Lewis, yeah.
But Len Bias was so stunning. In my personal story is, he gets drafted. He comes up to Boston, does interviews and stuff. I was part of a radio group in Boston that was interviewing him. I can still see him as we were interviewing him. He's sitting there in a new gray suit, and he had a red Celtic hat on, and his uncle and his father were beaming behind, And then the next morning, I was going to go to work. I was going to go to the office, I guess. And I'm in the driveway, and my son, who would have been 15, came out of the house and, Dad, Len Bias is dead. What? And then, I drove to the office, to the Globe Celtic office instead. And yeah, that was shocking. The whole thing was shocking.
How good was he? I was very young. How good was he going to be?
Here's the deal. I think he would have been James Worthy, not the Mount Olympus player, but a perennial All-Star Hall of Fame player, but not Michael Magic Larry,
yeah.
LeBron, Durant, not that level. But I think Worthy's a perfect level and twice in my personal acquaintanceship, Coach K told me that the two best opponents that he ever faced at Duke were Michael Jordan and Len Bias.
Yeah.
And I happened to have been, and I still don't know why I was in Durham at that particular night. Don't know, but I happened to have been present the night he dropped 40 on Duke in Cameron.
Yeah.
And got my attention. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
It was 6'8". He had a handle. He had nice mid range. Because nobody worried about 3-point shooting that much then. At all. But he would have done what he had to do. But rebounder, athletic, and he would have been an incredible bridge for them to keep it going. Now, the great speculation though? Sooner or later, he would have had to get his time. What would they have done? They certainly were never going to trade Larry.
No, it would have been interesting. How do
you
handle
weren't going to trade Robert. You needed a center. Would that mean that they would have sacrificed Kevin? We'll never know. But
Parrish goes small. I don't know.
I'll tell you this: in 1987, they fell short of the Lakers in 6 because they had no bench. They had no depth that year. They had Len Bias. We might have had a little different outcome then. So
you get one. You get one game in the history of the Celtics to reverse. What is it?
You know what it would be? It would be Game 7 in 2010 when they're up by 3, and because this is when Perkins got hurt and he couldn't play in Game 7, and they asked Rasheed Wallace, who had been effing off the whole season, and will you give us one good game, please, to earn your money, you big mouth, And here's a guy should be in the Hall of Fame, but because he wouldn't work hard enough to do that. So anyway, they're up by 3, and in 94 seconds and 3 possessions, they're down by 6. And Derek Fisher comes down and did what Derek Fisher did so often in those days, drills a 3, and they scored that 9th, and they took control of that game. And that team, they should have gotten more than one championship out of that group. Now in 2009, KG got hurt. Garnett's hurt, can't play, and they lose this. They lose to Tampa. No, Orlando. Okay, you can live with that. But they should have beaten the Lakers in 2010, absolutely, positively. And that one stands out for as much as anything.
Brent wants to know. He said you witnessed and wrote about the greatest era in rivalries in NBA history. Some incredible stories. Are there any old untold anecdotes that you didn't write about then that you can share now?
Not necessarily. I don't really think so. And just there's not to have to do with basketball, with the actual basketball necessarily. But no, I was, as you said, very privileged. Nobody could have been luckier and had a more fruitful career in that regard than I, having those Celtic teams and all the other things that happened in Boston. But no, not really. I can't tell you.
You're obviously, basketball is your thing, but you're very well rounded, and as a lot of the writers and reporters are. What else is, if you have to rank sports.
Well, my first love is, I never made a secret about this. Baseball is my first love. And that's when I know more about it. I always say, if everybody, now, a couple of things. You got me up my soapbox now. Every person on this earth, all 7 billion plus, every last one of us in this universe right now, on our planet, knows more about something than they do about every other thing. You know more about something. Everybody knows whatever it is. Everybody has to have, they know more. They may know next to nothing about anything, but there's something they know. The thing I know the most about is baseball. And that means the history of it. It's easy. It's an easy call. And there's more to know about baseball than the other sports, quite frankly.
Yeah, more
given
games,
the diversity of the positions and, and all that. And anyway, so that's number one. And here's part B. If I had to filibuster for my life for an hour or a day or a week, the topic I would have to choose is baseball because of what I just said. That's the topic I know the most. Now, it's close. Basketball, I love basketball. And that's the one I played better and longer, and actually competed longer in an actual uniform on an actual team. It would be basketball. And basketball has been very, very good to me. But my baseball is, in my opinion, I still think the greatest game ever invented. Although all sports have got flaws right now that need to be addressed. I can tell you, baseball, this whole 3 outcome thing and the launch angle nonsense and all that, is ruining baseball. It's really, really affecting it negatively.
You're talking about the pitching?
I mean, the whole idea of the 3 income, the strikeout, walk, home run, and then the whole emphasis on the the uppercut swing and home runs or nothing, and nobody cares about strikeouts anymore. Now, and the way they handle pitchers. Oh my God, the whole pitching thing, right? The pitching thing, as you just it's annoying, and it's not as enjoyable a game as it should be and used to be.
Look, Boston, basketball, Celtics, Red Sox, those are 2 of the greatest organizations in their sports. So,
and yet
it becomes easy.
Look what's happening. Whoever would have thought that 20 years ago, that the Patriots would ever become what they become.
Yeah,
that's the number one sports story of my entire career in Boston is the rise of the Patriots from number 4 in the pecking order of the teams to number 1, which sadly I have to say they are. And,
still number 1.
Still, although they're doing a lot to this right now to tear it down, but they rose to number 1. Who's number 1 now?
The Bruins might be the best team in the NHL right now. So.
Well, how about that? As we speak, the Bruins and the Celtics each have the best record in their leagues.
Yeah.
And no one. One of them was a little bit possible, and that was the Celtics. The other one was completely off the radar screen. Since the season started, the Bruins' first question is, can they stay alive without Brad Marchand? And there was somebody else was hurt. And so anyway.
Bill Burr, do you know Bill Burr, the comedian, has some great material, and he's
he was off my radar screen until I learned that he was going to be at Fenway last summer, and he's a real big deal, and somehow or other I missed it.
Yeah, so he's got some funny material. He talks about steroids and it's like, I want to see people, take whatever you want. But he also had a funny thing, which is kind of like true, like Babe Ruth, talking about, being the best. He was doing whatever he was doing. He also never played against black athletes. So how do you compare?
No, that's great. Well, that's a very legitimate point that people have come around to raise about baseball. The fact that so up till 1947, all these Caucasian players did not have to worry about competition from a very worthy set of conceivable colleagues and opponents in the Negro Leagues. There's no question you have to look at that. You should take that into consideration. There's no question. So that distorts the baseball discussion all time, no question. There's no doubt about that. I'm not going to argue that. And I think I consider myself enough of a baseball historian to be able to appreciate that. So,
yeah.
But in the world they lived in, there still was nobody that combined. Well, until now, that's ever combined pitching and hitting to the same degree. But who never thought we'd see another one?
Can Ohtani be the best, one of the best ever? I love what he's doing. Is it sustainable?
Absolutely. I want to see him. He's a little bit older than you realize. He's 28, right? Is that right? And so how much? I hope he's got another 10 years in doing this. I want to see it happen. I want to see it continue. It's phenomenal. It is. Now Ruth pitched, and then they gradually weaned him off the pitching, and he became a full-time hitter. But Ohtani is legitimately going out there next year. You got to pencil in 15 games and 200 next strikeouts, and also, oh, by the way, 100 RBI. That until further notice, I think that's a minimum standard.
They used to hit. The pitchers used to hit everywhere. When you're younger in college, when I was in Gainesville, Brad Wilkerson, I don't know if you remember him. He played for the Expos. He was an All-American pitcher and hitter. And then they don't.
We all grew up in with the way the world was. I remember one year Don Newcomb won 20 games, and I think he had 350 something and had 7 home runs. And there were a few outliers. But by the way, since you brought it up, Warren Spahn, 363 games, 20 games 13 times, unquestioned Hall of Famer, phenomenon, pitching no-hitter at age 42, blah, blah, blah. But my favorite, and was the losing pitcher in that famous 16-inning 1-0 game against Ron Marichal when they each went the distance. Great book about that called The Greatest Game Ever Played. Okay. But here's my favorite Warren Spahn tidbit. Warren Spahn hit at least 1 home run in 17 consecutive seasons.
Pretty good.
Now, how many position players can say that they hit a home run in 17 consecutive seasons, let alone a pitcher? But that's part of his legacy.
When we start talking about records that are never going to be broken and greatest athletes, the other day I was just looking at Wayne Gretzky. He might be the best athlete of all time. His records, I was going to try and look at his points and goals. There's no one who played in the 2000s, even in the top 20 of his, to get to close to his stuff.
His offensive numbers are astonishing, and it's like science fiction. I lived through it, and I swear, he's a great offensive player, but he's not the greatest hockey player of all time. The greatest hockey player of all time,
Gordy,
is 47 years after he retired, is still Bobby Orr.
Oh,
and Gretzky is like Steph Curry. He's greatest offensive. Nobody ever talked about it. Did he ever have to forecheck or back check? And he never hit or got hit, and that's hockey.
Was that Rob Lowe and Youngblood?
People have to understand this, but and that's why I was so gratified. A week ago, the day of the Winter Classic, Wayne Gretzky was part of the pregame and postgame show. And he was terrific. And he was talking about how, as a young player, he became acquainted with the late Ace Bailey. He died in 9/11, and Bailey. All he wanted to talk about with Bailey was every last tidbit of information Bailey could give him about Bobby Orr, because Wayne Gretzky grew up worshiping Bobby Orr, which I loved. I was so glad.
That's great to hear. What are you most impressed about record wise in sports? That's never going to be broken.
His totals are obviously astonishing.
There's so many, right? No one's going to score 100 points in a game.
Well, yep, the 100 points, which the thing about that night that's so aberrational and was pointed out this week, in fact, this very day. The other night the Heat made 40 consecutive free throws out of 40 to win a game by 1 point.
That's pretty good.
That sparked a discussion about individual free throws exploits. And Wilt Chamberlain, the night he scored the 100, was 28 for 32. And how that ever happened, given his free throw woes, is inexplicable. But to answer your question, that's very good. They're untouchable records because of the nature of the way the game's played.
Right.
I don't think we're ever seeing another 300 game winner, let alone a 400 or 500 game winner. No, but the world that Cy Young pitched in, you realize when Cy Young started in 1890, it was a 50-foot distance between home plate and the mound. And then during the 90s, that'd be the 1890s, in his prime, they lengthened it to its current 60 feet 6 inches. I'm just trying to think of it, any other baseball,
But even other stuff too. There's records. If you talk about Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus.
How many yards can somebody pass for? 5,000 is the golden figure now, but where's it all going to end? I don't know.
Who knows? Be crazy, right?
I'm just trying to think of anything else necessarily.
You'll let me know. My wife and I, huge Jeopardy fans. if you're on Jeopardy, it's Sports Jeopardy, it's all of sports. Who are the two toughest opponents for you, and can you beat them? Basically saying, who do you think is the most knowledgeable in sports?
You know who? Keith Olbermann. Keith Olbermann, very possibly. Certainly about baseball. I don't think I could overtake him in baseball. Keith Olbermann would be one. Trying to think of who. Because I'm not sure. I put myself up with a lot of people for versatility, but the Schwab, I mean.
Gosh, yeah.
The Schwab.
You think he would be pretty good at that?
Yeah.
Even the older stuff? I mean, he knows a lot of history, but
I don't know.
It'd be interesting. I mean, you have some votes. Are you a Hall of Fame voter?
I am a baseball Hall of Fame voter. I have been a basketball voter. For that you get a 3-year term, and I've had a couple of them. But baseball, yes, I am still a Hall of Fame voter.
Pete Rose, Barry Bonds, are they going to be in the Hall of Fame in our lifetime?
Totally different discussions, of course. Pete Rose was rightfully held out, has been rightfully kept out because of the gambling thing.
Anything he could do to change your mind? I'm
getting there. That was very legitimate. He lied about it until he died. But now that baseball has embraced gambling, as has every sport, and they're all up to their nose in gambling, there's no more justification to keep Pete Rose out. There's no more high roads. There's no high moral ground for baseball to occupy. They forfeited that.
But it still is illegal to gamble on your own sport.
I have written that. I know. I have written that.
Yeah.
I would, I'll go pick them up at the airport and take them. That's fine. I never voted when he was available for Bonds or all the obvious sordid suspects guys, but I have voted for people that other people think were not worthy. It's a very murky topic. I hate it. I've written this time and time again and said it over the last 15, 20 years that, it's taken so much of the fun out of voting. It made it so much different than it should have been. It should just be about a baseball issue. I always frame it, the ultimate baseball issue over many years was Jack Morris. He was the winningest pitcher of the 80s. If you put him in, he would have the highest ERA of any starting pitcher that ever been in the Hall of Fame. But
somebody's got to have that.
I voted for him. Okay, and not all. I started voting for him. I voted for him. I voted for Mike Piazza, and he's suspect. I voted for. To me, the only issue on Bagwell was an eye test and nothing else. I'm not sure about that.
Well, Hall of Fame. Here's my issue with the Hall of Fame. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. What does 15 years of voting change your career? That's what I don't understand about it.
That's a very interesting thing, and I think people. All right, I'll say this. Yes, you are, and you are, but I reserve the right to change my mind, and to be educated, and to be, and I've been open to persuasion. I think if you have that period of time, you didn't need 15. Now it's 10. That's fine. That's enough.
Yeah.
For some friendly persuasion or your personal education. I wound up voting for guys the last couple of years that I did not vote for, because of I said, you know what, why not? I think I'm wrong. I think this guy deserves it, and I didn't originally vote for him.
I give you one person in the history of sports that you can make a Hall of Famer who's not currently. Who do you pick?
Well, that right now I don't have an obsession. I've had many of them over the years. There was guys I was telling. For many years I wanted Richie Ashburn, and he got in. For many years Nellie Fox, and he got in. I'm trying to think who else. But I had some people over the years that I was stumping for. Same in basketball. I stumped for Maurice Cheeks for years, and he finally got in. And but that's it. Right now, I don't have one. I don't have that. I don't have an obsession or a personal, interest in a cause for anybody. There's a lot of, there's so many. But I have this goes back 25 years. I must have written it. I have to find it. But first of all, the idea that all these people were not unanimous, that until we got Mariano Rivera,
it's ridiculous.
That was utterly ridiculous. and the number one reason for many of them, not everybody that didn't get it, was stubborn old farts who didn't want to vote anybody in the first year. So how do you not vote for Ted Williams? How do you not vote for Hank Aaron? How do you not vote for Willie Mays? None of whom were unanimous, as you know. that was just, that drove me crazy. I once wrote a column, and this goes at least back 25 years. I counted between 50 and 75 guys who should have been unanimous.
Yeah.
Easily.
And it ruins it for some. I mean, you think, who cares?
And say that guy was in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Now, there's at least 75 people in the history of baseball about whom that could be said.
Is Al Horford a Hall of Famer when he's done?
Not for me.
No.
It's a nice player.
Yeah.
No, not even. I would really. Wow. No, I didn't.
That was from my friend Brent. We're big Horford and Gator fans. You just asked him since you're in Boston.
No, it's funny about Al Horford. You mentioned that. I saw the game, which exactly was his coming out game. It was during the Super Bowl the year in Jacksonville, and my friend Charlie Pierce and I went to see the Saturday afternoon. Gators were home. We went to the game, and it was
Ohio State, right?
It was Al. Al had a terrific game. It was his first really big game as a freshman. Now I'm very proprietary toward Noah because he went to Lawrenceville.
Yeah,
and
we love Joe. We love Joe too. How do you? This is probably difficult for you because it's really difficult for me. I can't take the bias out of a lot of things when I talk to teams that I really hate. You're a reporter. You're a Boston guy. How do you handle that?
Well, that's the fan. You have to govern. I will say sometimes suppress, the fan in you. I had guys that when I was covering the NBA, there were certain people that I really went after. Elvin Hayes. I couldn't stand Elvin Hayes. I couldn't stand Kevin Porter. And by the way, people know Kevin Porter Jr. now is not related to that Kevin Porter. I don't know. I want people to make that clear. He's related to a basketball player, but a different Kevin Porter, not the infamous Kevin Porter from the Bullets and of the 70s. So anyway, I went out of my way to take shots at guys, at times, so
what I'm saying is I'm a Gator. And there's teams. I hate the Cowboys. I can't talk intelligently about the Cowboys because I have so much hatred for them. You're a fan, obviously you got to do that.
That's an interesting group. When I first started, obviously the big rival was the Knicks in the early. Think about it, the early 70s. This is the Knicks heyday. The Knicks heyday starts the day they trade for Dave DeBusschere, which was the 19th of December in 1968. They traded Howard Kermives and Walt Bellamy to the Pistons for Dave DeBusschere. That made the Knicks. Now that year they don't beat the Celtics, but they took them a tough 6 games, and then they win it in 70. They win it in 73. They're contenders for 5 years. Okay, that team, they were tremendous rivals, but I admired them. I mean, Frazier, and then of course I got to know Bradley a little bit, and did love DeBusschere as a person. He's one of my all-time favorite guys and opponents I ever covered to talk to was Dave DeBusschere. And Willis Reed, who was a gentleman, and really a fine fellow. They were frenemies for me,
but as you get to know them, you kind of it kind of shapes how you feel about
Billy
them.
Cunningham, one of my all-time favorite guys that I ever dealt with, and it was tremendous to get to know. And Dr. J was a gracious guy to get to know.
Barkley,
but there were Barkley too. Absolutely, Barkley's on that list. I'm
who's the best player to not win a title?
I say that it's him. It's him.
Barkley.
And which leads me to, I'm going to anticipate. You might say, well, what about Karl Malone?
No, I would go Barkley.
All right. Karl Malone, to me, is not only the most overrated NBA player, he's the most overrated supposed superstar in the history of American sport. He scored more useless points than anybody, and he owes 90% of them to John Stockton.
Yeah.
And you don't want to anyway.
No, that's great. That's great
soundbite.
soundbite.
You should have seen the dynamics of those two in the Olympics.
Remember when they thought Malone and Peyton and all of them were going to do great?
Yeah, well, that was fuel for Michael.
Reggie Miller's up there, but he's not as good as Barkley.
No,
who's the best 3-point shooter that you've seen? My favorite player of all time is Dale Ellis.
Dale Ellis is sadly forgotten and not included enough in these discussions. Absolutely, but Curry's the greatest.
Curry, it's unbelievable.
I know his numbers. Sometimes he's only shooting 43% this year.
Yeah, I know.
But no, Curry's amazing, and he is the most influential player of the 20th.
I was just going to say that you talk about Tiger Woods and all this. You can't go to a court and not see kids jacking up 35-foot threes.
I wrote about this at the beginning of 21. And he's ruined basketball. Tongue in cheek, okay?
Yeah.
He's ruined basketball because of what you just said. Every 8-year-old kid's cranking up threes. But that's the way the world, they're all being trained to play the game now. He's had more influence. You don't need the whole hand to count the number of people who had a really major direct influence on the way the game was played. Cousy was one. Russell clearly changed, created a defensive concept of the value of the block shot and and all that. Elgin Baylor, who individually created in modern one-on-one basketball, and the people have to understand this. Elgin Baylor, and now Curry. Michael is an extension. The lineage goes Elgin to Dr. J to Michael. In terms of that level, that type of player.
Yeah, being the best doesn't necessarily mean that you've changed the game.
And LeBron's the latest extension of that, but he happens to be 4 inches taller, 3 inches taller than those guys. But back to Steph Curry. His influence is absolutely astonishing. And now you see Trae Young, he shoots. There used to be outer and Curry land, and now it's outer Curry land and oh, by the way, Young land. And more guys are shooting them 3 and 4 feet beyond the arc. And that's all the influence of Curry.
We had a guy, Teddy Dupay. You might remember him.
Teddy Dupay.
The second he crossed half court, you had to guard him. He would launch and he'd hit. Great shooter.
Teddy Dupay. I hadn't thought about that name.
Yeah,
it's funny because when Jimmy Williams was managing the Red Sox, and he was a big Gator basketball fan. And I remember he was telling us about Teddy Dupay. That was great.
Unbelievable shooter, one of the best I've ever seen. I want to do some quick fire stuff here. Should we expand the college football playoff?
Yeah, but only to 8.
12. Not 12. Here's my feeling. You cannot give anyone a bye. I don't like this NFL one team because it's such a huge advantage. And it's subjective in college football. There's no, you had the best record. So to give anyone a bye in the college football playoff to me is a real mistake.
No, I'm not in favor of that. If they don't, I know it's inevitable. 4 is never going to satisfy people. Satisfies me. Believe me, I'm okay with it. But I understand that it would not satisfy the true aficionados and people that love that game, and I find. But not to the. But you better get to the jackpot question fast.
What's that?
The NCAA.
Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous. Everyone knows you don't need to expand that.
Thank you.
Anyone. I don't know who is expanding that unless there's money in their pocket or their team can't get in.
No, it's absurd. And I hated it when they went to 68. I still,
Yeah, I don't see the point of that either.
64 worked perfectly. It remains my favorite. It had been always my favorite event. My favorite time of the year was always.
But there were people who didn't want, you would know better, who didn't want 64 when there were 32, and that seems to be like a good idea.
No, that worked out okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine. It's got a great dynamic to it.
I was really mad. There's one moment I was really mad that Virginia lost that game because I really liked them, and I wanted the 1 seed that lose to be like a Duke or a team people hate. And then, but they got it. They won it the next year, so that helped.
As far back as '86. Before people got to acquire their true hatred of Duke. Remember, they almost lost to Mississippi Valley State. They were in trouble with like 5 minutes to go back in '86, and Duke that far back.
What would you be reporting on if you had to be a reporter, but you can't do sports? What would you like to report on?
Oh, music. I'm a music. That's my next life. I want to be a disc jockey. If that phrase still exists, I want to be. Here's my fantasy that I always wished. It's not going to happen, but my fantasy would have been this. I would like to have had a weekly radio show on remember radio?
I've heard of it.
As opposed to podcasts, people actually got their music on the radio. And I'd like to have a radio show in which it would be a combination sports and entertainment, two-way talk show. And we would talk about sports or entertainment. You would call in and I would play an album of the week.
Let's do it. I'm in. I love it.
A 2-hour show or
I'm
3.
in.
3 would be good.
I'm in.
9 to 12 on Saturday night. How's that? Friday night.
Well, I got to ask my wife about that, but I'm in otherwise.
And then an album of the week, and it could be the Beatles. It could be the Sinatra, one of his. It could be Ray Charles. It could be, but so that would I love. I love music. That's my other life. If you could see my bookcase in our bedroom, there's probably about 50 or 75 books to do with composers and jazz and Great American Songbook and so forth.
I'm a big Mount Rushmore guy. I have actually a fan art Mount Rushmore here, so I want a few Mount Rushmores from you real quick. Music. Who's in your music? It could be your favorite or the best, however you want to see it. Mount Rushmore of music.
Well, and for all around, I start with Sinatra. And then in terms of the rock and roll era, which I'll define from 55 on, would have the pinnacle would be the Beatles for me. And Ray Charles, I think, is the greatest all-around singer ever. That everything from gospel to jazz to whatever top 40s. That nobody sang more versatile, better in a more versatile way than Ray Charles. And then let's see.
That's three.
Well, that's three. Elvis trying to get away from. It really is. Elvis's influence obviously was extraordinary. So I just off the top of my head, and I know I'm going to get something very obvious, but just throw that in there and I'll say it. But if I want to go, stick to the pop music world, I would. If Sinatra's one, Tony Bennett's 1A. I'll tell you that, and that's for sure. But my all-time, I'll leave you with this one on this topic. The greatest entertainment that I ever experienced live was being in a place called Lenny's at the Turnpike and Route 1 north of Boston to hear the Buddy Rich Band in his prime in the 70s and 80s. That was my all-time greatest entertainment.
This is probably going to be a tough one for you. You might have thought about it. You might have written about it. Boston athletes, Mount Rushmore. 4.
Oh no! This is easy. It's easy because and I'll stack ours up with anybody. Okay, number one, it's Russell, the greatest, and then you've got Orr, and then you've got Ted Williams, and Brady's there. It's Brady. And that means you don't have Bird, who's 5. You don't have Cousy. You don't have Poppy or Pedro, Roger.
What city can go? If you say that's the best, which city do you think would be second? Is it New York, LA?
I would have to guess off the top of my head that New York would. Although just trying to think, baseball alone would give them Ruth and would give them DiMaggio and Mantle to pick from. I'm saying, right away. But after that, they'd stumble a little bit. And, and I don't know who would be considered the greatest Ranger of all time. I'm not sure, but
it'd be good. It's a tough call.
And then you come to football, and then you come to football. Who is the god of all time?
LT maybe or
LT probably. Yeah. Unfortunately,
maybe
Gifford.
Namath.
Gifford maybe.
Maybe Namath. Who's playing you in a movie? Who would you like to play you in a movie?
I'd say, well, once you get the right age, I'm not sure about the young me, but I was Richard Gere. Richard Gere's my
that'd be good.
He gets the late the middle age me. And
I think that would be good.
The other one? I'm going to throw this one out. That you mentioned this. I may be the only person on earth that believes this. I've never watched the show, but I've seen clips and promos. The actor who plays young Sheldon.
Oh yeah, he's
looks
great.
like the 7-year-old me.
Yeah.
Yes. If you ever saw a picture of the 7-year-old me, you'd be amazed.
I don't think I have. What's your favorite venue outside of Boston?
My all-time favorite venue outside of Boston in basketball, it's the Penn Palestra, which I started first going to in 1955 to 52, and in baseball, Tiger Stadium, late limited Tiger Stadium.
The late Tiger Stadium.
My favorite ballpark of all time.
An event you never covered that you would love to do.
This one's going to not freak people out, but the College Baseball World Series.
Oh, so great.
I always thought it would be great. I always wanted to do it. I would want to do it at Rosenblatt Stadium. I don't want to go anymore because they're not in Rosenblatt anymore. So, but it was always up against the NBA Finals.
Yeah. It's a bucket list for anyone. I've been.
I used to watch it from the NBA Finals and the NBA playoffs, but that would be the number one. Other than that, in America, no. I think I've done everything that really matters to me. In terms of major events, which include the golf majors and so forth. I'd like to do internationally. I'd like to go to some big clash in inner city major soccer clashes,
Premier
Rangers
League.
and Celtics or Inter Milan and Juventus or whatever, or maybe go to a Barca Real Madrid game, something like that.
My friends are Liverpool, so we're a Liverpool house here.
I have been to a Paris Saint-Germain game, a home game. They lost at home to Lille.
Mhm.
And I've been to Chelsea, and they lost at home to Bournemouth of all people. So
favorite sports book, favorite sports movie.
The single favorate book. I would. It's awful hard. The Boys of Summer still resonates a lot.
Mine is Strike Zone by Jim Bouton. Have you read it?
Because I did read Ball 4, of course. That's
Have you read Strike Zone? It's a fiction.
Oh no.
Oh, it's a great book about baseball. I think you'd like it.
And the movie Hoosiers.
Hoosiers, my favorite. One of my all-time favorite movies at all. That Field of Dreams. Those are.
I really like Hoosiers a lot. And I remember when that book came out, when that movie came out, Jerry Seasteen was playing for the Celtics, and of course he's from Martinsville, Indiana, and grew up in that world. And we asked him about it, and he said the depiction, the famous scene of the caravan driving,
when he picks up the kid, the dog.
It's totally true.
Really?
Totally true. He
That's
said
awesome.
that he thought that they really hit it. They really got it right.
What House on Fire? You can take one sports item from your career or that you've collected, accumulated. What do you take?
Can I get two?
Two. I'll give you two.
A book and a picture. A book and a picture.
Okay.
Okay. The picture is right. You can't see it, but it's right up here. In 1992, at the Olympics in Monte Carlo, the week we spent in Monte Carlo prepping, I had my picture taken with Larry and Magic on the court.
That's
and
awesome.
When I stood in the middle between them, one of them put his shoulder on mine, so the other one did. So I'm standing there with them too, with their arms on my shoulder. That's one. The other one is a book, John Updike. Many years ago, I was on the Eastern Shuttle, the old Eastern Shuttle, and I ran into John Updike at the carousel, luggage carousel, and I introduced myself and blah blah blah. Long story short, he told me he did read the Globe and blah blah blah, and it was having a new limited edition 500 of his famous essay, "Hub Fans Bid Kid at You," about Ted Williams, but greatest sports essay ever written, frankly. And would I like one? Yeah, I think I'll take one. And he mailed it, and it's signed from an admirer. Well, whatever bullshit that might be, I'll take it. So those two things get saved. Everything else will go.
Who's the nicest person in sports?
Jesus.
Maybe you can even just go by reporters or ESPN personalities. Like, who is it that you say is?
Jesus, it's just. I know it's going. This is terrible because I know I'm going to think. I can't think of anybody specifically jumping out to it.
That's all right. We'll move on. And speaking about being nice, I'm a Mr. Rogers. I watch those documentaries like this. There's no way this guy's human. And if in this world you like the Tim Tebow's of the world, he comes out as my mind. If you read something nefarious about this person in the news, you'd be like, no, there's no way that's true. Who is it for you? Mine is Tim Tebow. Who is it for you?
I don't know. We've never even met. But I'll put it this way. I would be really disappointed based on everything I've heard and what I've observed about the way he carries himself and what I've heard about his personal life of a person of real stature that, has reason to think highly of himself. And that's Steph Curry.
Yeah.
I'd be disappointed to find out there's dirt on Steph Curry. I just want to like him so much.
I'd be less shocked than Tebow, but NIL, Tebow for me, Reggie Bush. Give me a name that would have been just, man, loading it up.
You mean in sports?
In college, yeah, NIL, a college player who wasn't able to get, make any money.
See, you got a problem with me because I'm not sympathetic to the NIL.
Yeah, I'm not either. I think it's the portal is the worst in NIL.
Some people. I'll tell you what. I never thought about it in these terms ever, but I'm just thinking right on the fly. There's a person a rather high profile athlete who's individual accomplishment of how he did for a team in at one point in history has never been surpassed since in the ensuing years. What Bird did to drag Indiana State to the NCAA finals in 1978-79 was worthy of some compensation, I think. So I'll say that. But
what's the worst thing in sport? You talked about leagues. I think the transfer portal in college. If you can change one rule in any sport, what are you changing?
Well, that's certainly the idea of the way it's been bastardized, and the way I'm just upset about the whole trend of the college sports. I am very proprietary to college sports. As I've mentioned to you, I go back as far as 1952 with being introduced into the world of college sports. And I lived through it in school in my 4 years at Boston College when we were good, really good. We went to the tournament twice. We went to NIT twice when it mattered. They went to class. Let me give you an example. I'm rambling here, but we had a great player named Terry Driscoll, who was the fourth pick in the 1969 draft, and was the NIT MVP. Didn't have an NBA career of any consequence. Did go to Europe anyway. Terry's, I still think, as good a player as BC ever had. He was a pre-med major, and 1 year, because of the lab that he had, Bob Cousy simply changed the practice time to accommodate Terry Driscoll because of his lab, as a pre-med major. And I mean, I'm sure that wasn't unique. They went to class then, they went to school. And, now with all these transfers, is anybody keeping track of whether they ever really going to class?
No,
I'm sorry.
I'm with you.
I have said this and written it. It's in my book, my book Scribe, to be a fan of college sports is like being in love with a hooker. And I wrote that 8 years ago in my book. And it's
gotten worse for sure in the last 8 years.
I mean, the laughability that there's any academic pretense left in big time college sports and football and basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke. Nobody cares. Who's monitoring these kids in terms of academia?
Agreed.
Are you serious?
But what's the one rule you would change in any sport? Baseball, basketball, what would you change?
Well, you ready? I hate offsides. Offsides in hockey and soccer is it's the most pointless rule ever. Don't get me started on offsides. I hate offsides.
You would get rid of offsides.
Offsides. Hate it.
Yeah.
Period.
It's interesting to watch though, because it's a rule that's so easy to follow that makes sense, and you're looking for it. It's a part of the game that you're really looking for.
I'm always appalled. It's ridiculous.
Well, look, it's so impressive the career you had. One of the most impressive things for me is you retired in 10 years ago, right? But you're still working. I mean, I'm sure you don't feel like it's work.
I do three things. Okay, I write every other Sunday for the Boston Globe. Every other Sunday, I do Around the Horn, ESPN, every other week, and I have a podcast with Jeff Goodman and Gary Tanguay weekly in basketball.
Yeah,
it keeps me active. It keeps me needing to keep up. My wife will verify this. I watch more sports on TV now than when I was actively working. Traveling 50% of the time, traveling and working and doing what I was doing. I watch because I still enjoy watching sports, but B, I have a obligation. You got to bring something to the table. I can't just be rhapsodizing about the 1974 finals.
We have a friend of the program, Ben Chase. Did you hear about Ben Chase? Went to 77 college football games this year.
No, I didn't.
He on a road, got in his own car. He was out of work and he went on set. You should read up on that. It's a great story. I tape PTI. I love the guest host too. Around the Horn, for me, it's so arbitrary, the points he gives. I think if I would change it.
No, that's the funniest thing. Yeah, it's just whatever Tony's way.
Yeah, so you don't even need to keep the points, but I get it.
No, but it's the format just to keep but that show we are a spin-off of PTI.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And if PTI hadn't come along with, and we owe them our life in a sense, with Tony and Mike and the staff.
Well, you'd be fine without Around the Horn, but Tony certainly does, and others.
We exist only because we were created to ride on their coattails with that audience and half out, and that's exactly, and we're here 20 years later. We just had our 20th anniversary special.
Is Cal the coach? Brent wants to know, is Cal the coach of Kentucky next year?
Boy, it's not a guarantee. I mean, it's getting, he's getting hotter. He loses 26 to Alabama the other night. They lost to South Carolina at home, correct?
Yeah.
It's really bad. And particularly they were anticipating a top 5 team, I believe, this year. I never dreamed it would end like this. It could, that it's going to deteriorate into this. I would say that. So I'd say I'm a percentage chance guy. I'd say it's at least a 40% chance he won't be.
He's like underrated and overrated all at the same time, I think.
Yeah, I think he can coach. People think he's just I saw it up firsthand with UMass. I always call him a charming rogue. He's an envelope pusher. And it was, but I have personal reason why I'm indebted to him and not be honest about that. So
we don't care for him. I'll be honest about that.
I try to recuse myself from these discussions.
There was a podcast, and I forgot to ask you this, which I said I would ask you. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You can start one, you could bench one, and you can cut one. At first I put Russell, start Russell, bench Wilt, and then cut Kareem. But when I started I did some more research. Wilt has got to be the starter. Now it's just a question of, do you cut Kareem or Bill?
Well, it's interesting because I always say that any discussion of the top players in the history of the league, exclusive of position, those 3 are in the top, 5. And then you throw in Michael and LeBron, and there's your 5 greatest players ever. That's a tough one.
But Wilt's better. Wilt was a better player, skill-wise and all that than Russell. He dominated him. His stats were ridiculous.
Yeah, except that Russell was the only one who could handle Wilt, and he did. I can handle him psychologically as well as physically. Wilt. That's an interesting one. It really is.
Yeah.
Just in terms of competitiveness, Russell was more competitive than both of them. Really. Kareem coasted along with all those years until Magic showed up. He could for several years. You realize that in the famous Memorial Day Massacre game in 85, excuse me, and that was on a Monday. It was Memorial Day, right? Celtics beat them 148-114, and he took that very personally. And the next game wasn't until Thursday. Talk about NBA stupid scheduling, which are notorious for it.
Ridiculous.
And he comes out and they win the game, and he has 17 rebounds, which was the most rebounds he had in 10 years. Now, how does he go 10 years? Well, it's because he wasn't going after the ball.
Yeah.
He was floating around. So, in terms of competitiveness, maybe I'll bench him in that regard and keep Wilt and Russell.
Yeah. What about Russell Westbrook? Obviously, he's deteriorating a little bit. And is he not very underrated? A triple-double like Oscar Robertson? I mean, he's not. It's you can get a triple-double. He averaged a triple-double.
I know. And the best thing for me about all that was it restored Oscar's name, so people would have to recognize, how great Oscar was.
But do people realize how hard it is to average a triple-double?
The big difference in how they did it was that in Oscar's time, there were far more rebounds to get, and someone had to get them. People took more shots and made fewer.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, assists are handed out like so much water. And guys will shoot better. So you throw a ball. The idea in Oscar's time that you could pass the ball to a guy behind an arc that was 20-some feet from the basket, he would throw that in the basket and you would get the assist, was not possible. It wasn't possible. You didn't get an assist on a basket like that, and if such a thing existed. And now today you get an assist on threes, which would, my God. But anyway,
I could chat with you for forever. I got 2 last questions, and then we're going to let you go. You mentioned the game, the college game with the record. What's the most memorable thing? You'll never forget where you were when this happened, good or bad, in sports.
Comes down to the 2 college games, and 2 NCAA games. One is the Villanova-Georgetown game. And people will have to understand the context of how invincible Georgetown appeared to be at that moment, even though, they weren't undefeated. But they were playing peak efficiency. Had just gotten through blowing out St. John's for the third time that year. Played St. John's 4 times, lost to them once. Then they crushed them the next 3 times. And Villanova had lost 10 games, and they had gotten as far as they had gotten, in a nice little run in the NCAA. We all knew it's going to end tonight. And then it was the last game without a clock, as you know. And Villanova shot 9 for 10 in the second half, and it didn't feel like they were holding the ball. I mean, I have to explain. Anyway, and the game ended with the ball being trapped on the floor right in front of me. The other one, of course, is Duke, Kentucky.
Oh, the Leitner?
And that's the Leitner, the so-called Leitner game, and Grant Hill game. And that game was just phenomenal. We played one of the greatest college game I've ever seen, period.
Wow, that would be something.
Kentucky game.
That would be something else.
So I know where I was then, and I sat with Michael, with Tony Kornheiser and Mike Lupica, and we all drove from Philadelphia to New York to do the sports reporters the next day. So
Mike Lupica, famous Seinfeld reference with George Costanza. Well, we're going to let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question everyone gets. You have 24 hours to spend with anyone in the world. You can't be related to them, and they have to be alive. It doesn't have to be sports. Who would you pick, and what would you guys do?
Because there's people. Oh man, no.
Who comes to mind?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it into my other world of music, and I'm trying to think who's. But some of them have gone on. I always thought my one person I totally idolized was Alistair Cook, and if he were alive, he'd be the answer. And we could talk about jazz, we could talk about politics, we could talk about he loved golf. We could Alistair Cook would have been one.
Tough question for anyone, but you've met so many great people and personalities that have access, so I can imagine it's harder. Who alive? Who comes to mind?
I know. I'm just thinking. Well, in terms of this music thing again, and and I know it can be. I guess he can be irascible, but I would like to pick the brain of Quincy Jones. I think he's the most remarkable figure in our time when you consider the span that goes from everything from growing up with Ray Charles, literally in Seattle, to being the arranger for the greatest Sinatra album of them all, in my opinion, which is Sinatra to Sands. He was the orchestra leader, and not orchestra, Basie. And then We Are the World, and all the stuff that he's done with. There's nobody I'd like to talk to music more than Quincy Jones.
Well, I think you should do a radio show if that's what you want to do. Someone would pick that up. Someone would make it happen. If not, you let me know. We'll do once a month. We'll come on and we'll do a different show, and we'll talk about music and sports. I love it. I really am grateful for you joining the show today. Most people, who are done the stuff that you do and on the shows, they would have gotten an email like that from me and been like, who's this person? Forget it. And you answered right away and gone through some, we won't tell everyone what we had to go through to get you onto the show here with technical stuff, but I truly am grateful. I've always been a big fan. This is one of those times you meet someone and you just, it rises to another level. And I think my listeners are going to really enjoy this conversation as they listen to it. And I look forward to, it's great that you're still doing it. I love the fact that you're a fan. That's why I do what I'm doing with the tickets. I'm a fan. And when that drives you to do what you love, you can tell it as anyone else can. There's nothing better than that, being a fan, the highs, the lows, laughing, crying, loss, wins, whatever it is. It's all good.
Do you have another minute and a half that I can expand on that? Okay. One of the things that drives me crazy in my business is when people say, well, I just care about writing about people. I said, oh, that's fine. You just want to write about people. Well, that's the easy part. That's a layup drill. If you have any kind of command of the language, compassion, humor, sensitivity, you can write about people. The point is this, no matter what we're talking about, a Bulgarian weightlifter, we're talking about a Wimbledon champion, we're talking about a NBA finalist, whatever, a World Series winner. If it weren't for the games that they play, the competition that's involved, we wouldn't care about these people. And so if your core interest isn't the love of the competition and the love of the games, then then I don't want to hear about it. The people don't matter. So There you go. That's all. So my interest has been rooted with being a fan first, and being a fortunate person to have the access I've had to develop that interest.
It's great, and it's also what you've done with it, right? And people have plenty of access, and they either waste it or they do something that will cause them to not have that access anymore. And but again, really appreciate it. Tune in next week. We have some more guests on the Wolff Den, and you can watch this replay anytime. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.